This is a call to all artists, from the front lines to the hilltops. If you are aware of the conditions corrupting social relations in cultural, ecological, economic, and political spheres, and feel the necessity of collective discussion, planning, and action, then please join us.
This is a call to those who make art with others or by themselves. You may make art about crisis or live within it. You may wonder what art can do and what artists can do. The increasing commodification of creativity and professionalization of art demands that those who claim to be artists find ways to both utilize marginality and push away from it through participation and social critique.
The market often determines the value of our art and work, the form our art/work takes, as well as the nature of our relationships with one another. Economic forces and larger societal trends have shifted stakes for the structures of exchange, interpersonal and commodity-driven, structures of labor, how we work, where we work, and what kind of work we do, and structures of time, the 24-hour workday, and blurring divisions between labor and leisure. The market often determines the value of our art and work, the form our art/work takes, as well as the nature of our relationships with one another. Economic forces and larger societal trends have shifted stakes for the structures of exchange, interpersonal and commodity-driven, structures of labor, how we work, where we... I'm saying this twice now, aren't I? Okay, you get the point.
There are daily reminders of the uneven distribution of power and privilege that haunt our contradictory existence. War, deportations, wrongful incarceration, homelessness, police brutality, and inequality in education, healthcare, and city services are among other ills that contribute to a fragmentation of our social bonds. A picture of what these oppressive forces have done to life should arouse every artist to action. We invite you to help us hone in on these and other looming emergencies of our day which we might band together. We artists must act collectively. History gives us powerful examples of the relationship between productive political struggle, social change, and artists working together.
We must look for alliances where we have failed to look before. There's a need for organization on a larger scale, starting in Chicago. Building on traditions of the American Artists Congress, the Association for Advancement of Creative Musicians, the Black Artists Retreat, the Chicago John Reed Club, the Chicago Women's Liberation Graphics Union, the Department of Space and Land Reclamation, the Interracial Southside Cultural Conference, Lady Fest Midwest, the Wall of Respect, Women's Action Coalition, and We Want More. We come together again. Welcome. We are really glad to have you. I am Susie Bielak. I am the Associate Director of Engagement and Curator of Public Practice here at the Block, and we all thank you for being here with us today. The impetus for the call that you just heard, and for today's gathering, began with the Block Museum's current exhibition, The Left Front, Radical Art in the Red Decade, 1929 to 1940, a historic show focused on artists and writers from the 1930s who were invested in social change and involved in the collectives of the John Reed's Clubs and ensuing American Artists Congress. The Left Front was the first show I sunk my teeth into last fall when I stepped into a new role as curator of public practice. Moving to Chicago, a city with a deep history of labor activism and a current nexus for socially engaged artists, as many of you in the audience probably know and probably are, folks who are doing work ranging from social practice to photojournalism and from urban planning to legislative transformation, I was quickly struck by the great resonance the exhibition had both with our current moment and our current geography. I was struck, too, by questions of similarity and difference between this moment and the historical moment of the 1930s. As articulated in the 1936 call for the American Artists Congress, in the 1930s there was a clear target. It was fascism. And there was a clear issue, class struggle. There was a question of how artists might address these issues, as posed by Left Front member Louis Lazowick in 1930. What should revolutionary artists do today? While we're certainly living with global social, political, and environmental issues around which contemporary artists might rally together, things like climate change, the recession, and many others that you heard named in the call, I wondered, what are the issues around which artists might band together here and now? What are the possibilities and impediments to producing revolutionary art today? Does it exist, and if so, in what forms? And as cultural producers, how do we look to history beyond nostalgia? In the spirit of collectivity, I invited Daniel Tucker and Michael Rakowitz, two of the folks you just heard from. You'll meet the others soon, Anthony and Nicole. Daniel and Michael are two colleagues that I deeply respect for their work and ethics, and I invited them to help us imagine what a contemporary artists' congress might look like. Rather than ascribe a format and topics around which to create a congress, we hosted a series of planning sessions, asking dozens of other artists, educators, activists, and organizers to help us think about these questions through discussion and debate. You can see the names of all of those who came to the meeting in your program, and I encourage you to do so. Some of their work was in the slideshow playing when you came in, and I really encourage you to look it up later. We'll also have it on the website so you can see what's going on in Chicago. The conversations with all of these people were instrumental in directing the very shape of today's program and the multiple platforms that complement it. One of those is this. In our discussions, we were mindful of the work on the ground happening here in Chicago by social justice organizations and the artists who collaborate with them. In an effort to acknowledge this important work, Daniel, Michael, and I reached out to 6 such organizations working throughout Chicago to offer the names of artists making meaningful contributions to their fields. The nominating organizations include Teachers for Social Justice, Arise, the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Representation, Repression, Grassroots Collaborative, Southside Together Organizing, and the Community Justice for Youth Institute. Nominated artists include Dorothy Berg, Toyin Aboyade Cole, Mike Sivewe Elliott, Ellen Gradman, Jamie Hayes, Jennifer Juarez, Darius Lightfoot, Veronica Morris-Moore, Sarah Jane Rhee, and Sarah Wild. And please forgive me if I've mispronounced your name. Would all of the artists or any of the artists who have been nominated please stand so we can recognize you? Thank you. We thank you for the work and for coming. And again, I really encourage you to look at the programs as they contain rich information about these artists, their work, and the organizations with whom they collaborate. Today's event consists of presentations, music, performance, and an open session intended for your participation. Regarding the presentations, we're honored to have an extraordinary group of practitioners and thinkers with us today, as you'll see from their bios in the program. Rather than introduce them on stage, we're going to refer you again to the program because we want to save time for Q&A with you. We really want today to be as discursive as possible. Today, to that end, is going to conclude with an open session. As you'll see, this is a time intended for contributions and questions for all of you. So in the ensuing moments and hours, if you'll think about what you'd like to discuss, why did you come here today, and where and how our collective voices can come together, the open session is going to be a time for that. We encourage you to stay through the course of the day, both for the open session and the reception that follows, to meet all of the people in the house around you, and we will also be offering you refreshment and food. I want to deeply thank everyone who's been involved in the planning process, as well as those of you who are joining us for the first time. And I also want to note that as we were in conversations around this program, this was just one of the iterations of the kind of program that we could imagine, given the depth of thought, talent, and perspective of the dozens of minds who have come together with us. And while we recognize that we only have a short while together today, we do hope that conversations continue beyond this event, including this summer. As you'll see, we're hosting a potluck picnic. It really is just a social gathering, and we encourage you to come on June 22nd. Finally, I want to offer thanks. This project is one with many thanks. Thanks begin with John Murphy and Jill Bugajski for curating a catalytic exhibition that sparked this project, and the Block Museum for being a flexible and generous host, taking on the open-ended processes that accompany collaboration and socially engaged work. We thank the staff at the Block Museum and Barber Theater for helping produce this event. I would particularly like to thank Lisa Corin for your belief in the project, and Jess Kasweiner and Maggie Borowitz for your dedication and support in the process. Again, we thank the very many contributors to the planning process, without whom this wouldn't be possible. I want to specifically acknowledge Daniel and Michael for your commitment and generosity as collaborators. It means a lot for me personally, and as we chart a new future for engagement at the Block. I'm coming to a close, don't worry. The last thing is I want to thank the Terra Foundation and the Kaplan Institute for Humanities who have made this possible, the program and the process. And lastly, just a quick bit of housekeeping. Bathrooms are available in the back of the house. We're going to be here in the Barber Theater until the break, at which point we're going to head next door to the Block Museum. There will be refreshments during the break, and we really encourage you to see this catalytic show, The Left Front, that kicked this all off. Then we're going to come back here for more presentations, performance, the open session, and return next door for the reception. And with that, I want to invite John Murphy to the stage.
Well, thanks. It's really a privilege to be here, and I'm glad Susie ran through the thanks, so I don't have to repeat them. There's a lot of people I would like to thank too, but I would like to thank Jill Bukowski especially, who can't be here, but who's my co-curator of the show and who I learned so much from, and also my radical revolutionary friends such as Ben Schacht, who's here, from whom I've learned very much. I'm a fellow traveler, he's a revolutionary, and your friendship means a lot to me. Oscar Wilde said that the problem with socialism is that it takes up so many evenings, but that's the point. Engagement demands time, effort, and much more than an afternoon. But at least activists and artists who are here in the trenches in Chicago will have a platform today to share their work and suggest ways that we could all be more involved. They are carrying on the legacy of the courageous activist artists from the 1930s. So what is that legacy? My contribution this afternoon, the way I see it, is just to give a bit of context for the first American Artists Congress in 1936, why it was convened in an answer to what crises, and some lessons that we might take from it. A central theme of the Left Front exhibition upstairs, or next door in the block, is the power of collective action. The show is about two organizations of activist artists in the United States in the 1930s, the John Reed Clubs and the American Artists Congress. Both organizations attracted a diverse range of artists working in a dizzying array of styles, from realism to expressionism to surrealism to abstraction. But what united them was a common goal, or maybe it's more accurate to say a common enemy, which can almost be just as galvanizing. In the case of the John Reed Club, formed in 1929 in the wake of the stock market crash and the Great Depression, that enemy was capitalism, pure and simple. The John Reed Club manifesto is bracing stuff. I'll quote from it. We call upon all writers and artists to abandon decisively the treacherous illusion that art can exist for art's sake, or that the artist can remain remote from the historic conflicts in which all men must take side. We urge them in forging a new art that shall be a weapon in the battle for a new and superior world. Close quote. So two key ideas emerge here. One, that the artist has a moral obligation to take sides in historic conflicts. Two, that art can be a weapon in the service of a larger social or political project. And we can agree or disagree with this, think about the autonomy of art and so on and so forth, but that is the gauntlet that they threw down that I think we are obliged to think about. For John Reed Club members, the question, what is revolutionary art, actually had a somewhat straightforward answer. Revolutionary art should awaken class consciousness, promote international proletarian culture, and realize the ultimate triumph of the working class. So no revolutionary art without a revolution, in other words. As the 1930s wore on, the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy became the clear and present danger to international peace and democracy. Communists saw the need to make common cause with leftists of all stripes, independent leftists, socialists, New Deal Democrats, etc., against the reactionary forces of fascism. So there was a shift in the mid-30s from the sectarianism and somewhat exclusiveness of the John Reed clubs towards a more inclusive, broad-based coalition known as the Popular Front. Yet the call for an American Artists Congress, we saw it on the screen a couple minutes ago, still evokes themes similar to the John Reed Club Manifesto. Quote, "This call is to those artists who, conscious of the need of action, realize the necessity of collective discussion and planning. It is for those artists who realize that the cultural crisis is but a reflection of a world economic crisis and not an isolated phenomenon," close quote. So the way I see it, those two themes reemerge again. One, the need for collective action, the artist is not isolated. And two, that culture, economics, and politics are interconnected. The artist cannot stand outside of historic conflicts. So in February 1936, a group of artists, writers, scholars, and critics met in New York City to discuss and debate how they might contribute to the Popular Front's struggle against war and fascism. Stuart Davis, the executive secretary of the Congress, answered the question, why an Artists Congress, by saying, quote, "Artists at last discovered that, like other workers, they could only protect their basic interests through powerful organizations," close quote. Aaron Douglas talked about the status of African American artists in American culture. Margaret Burke White reported on, quote, "an artist's experience in the Soviet Union," a rather glowing report to contrast with the artist's experience in the United States. George Biddle called for a boycott of the Berlin Olympics art exhibition in Nazi Germany, a resolution that unanimously passed. Meyer Shapiro delivered his famous lecture, The Social Bases of Art, and David Siqueiros spoke of the Mexican experience in art, among many other lectures. So there were broad-ranging issues and perspectives represented. The common themes did come through, anti-fascism, obviously, but also the economic vulnerability of artists, the need to protest censorship and discrimination, and ultimately the need for artists to organize to protect their interests. An important thing to remember about the Congress is that fascism was not seen as an exclusively foreign threat, something that's out there in Germany and Italy. There was homegrown domestic fascism to contend with as well. The call lists, quote, "daily reminders of fascist growth in the United States, oaths of allegiances of teachers, investigations of colleges for radicalism, sedition bills aimed at the suppression of civil liberties, discrimination against the foreign-born," and so on. Stuart Davis put it bluntly, there is a real danger of fascism in America. In the opening address of the Congress, I think Chairman Lewis Mumford made an important point. Sometimes the only way you get to know your neighbor is when your building is on fire. Catastrophe brings us together. For the artists in the 1930s, that was the economic catastrophe of the Great Depression and the global threat of fascism. So what is our catastrophe? I think that's a key question for today. There will be different answers, different opinions. Speaking for myself, and with all due respect to the language of the preface to the open call today, I don't agree that today we face a series of roving targets, climate change, gun violence, wealth disparity, and so on, that are unattached from a monolithic target. There is a monolithic target. So monolithic it's the polluted air we breathe. So monolithic its triumph marked, according to Francis Fukuyama, the actual end of history, neoliberal capitalism. I mean, at this point, you don't really have to be a Marxist to see that democracy might need to be saved from this form of big bank, big business capitalism, in which private interests trump the public good. Many, probably most members of the American Artists Congress didn't want to overthrow the American government. They simply did not want democracy to curdle into fascism. They wanted it to protect civil liberties, support the arts, and not traffic in censorship or capitulate to corporate interests at the expense of the common good. So the point of any Congress is to bring people together, to talk about common interests, common goals. And one concept that's been in the air recently that I'm interested in is in fact communism. Sorry, little sneak preview of what's to come. Communism is maybe, and I'm not sure about this, open to debate, a potential way out of the impasse that associates communism with historically specific authoritarian regimes. We could think in terms of ecological commons, water, forests, air, soil, social commons, housing, education, healthcare, the commons of communication, such as the internet, creative commons, cultural commons, shared resources. In other words, what are the things we have in common that need protecting, that are potentially finite, and which would spell disaster if access to them was privatized or enclosed? And how might artists and culture workers actively participate in the protection and equitable distribution of these shared resources? To answer that question, or at least to suggest one way to approach it, I don't think we should emphasize what's different about the 1930s and today. Instead, we should think about what's the same: crisis-prone capitalism, wealth disparity, the depletion and exploitation of shared resources, racial and gender discrimination, and the vulnerable status of the arts in society. It is the lesson of the American Artists Congress that these issues are all connected. 1930s activist artists put aside aesthetic differences. There were no aesthetic prescriptions at the Artists Congress, no saying of what art should look like or be like. They found common ground. They protested censorship, organized exhibitions and symposia, staged sit-ins, lobbied for federal funding of the arts, boycotted fascist events, satirized the rich and powerful, and joined the picket lines of fellow striking workers. So why an Artists Congress? The house is on fire. I say it's time we get to know our neighbors. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Dorica, and welcome, and why am I saying welcome? Thank you all for being here this afternoon. So I'm here to tell you about a particular project that's representative of some of the other work that I've done. And that was a project that occurred in May of 2011 to coincide with the 125th anniversary of the Haymarket bombing. So, May 2011 marked the 120th anniversary of the bombing in Haymarket Square. What I have up here on the screen behind me is the sort of first representation of that event, which is what Americans would have seen when they picked up a copy of Harper's Weekly on the 15th of May, 1886. Now, it was obviously a very sort of divisive event at the moment that it occurred, and today, it still remains very divisive. It's an event of not only national significance, but also international significance as well. And then much of the modern labor movement traces its origins back to what occurred here in Chicago in 1886. And yet, if you ask the sort of average Chicagoan, I don't mean to be patronizing here, but if you ask the average Chicagoan, like, what happened in Haymarket and then why it's significant, you'll probably get some sort of mixed responses. And to give you a sense of the degree to which this story is sort of under-narrated, Oscar Neebe Jr., he was the grandson of one of the 8 men who would be put on trial in connection with the bombing. It wasn't until he was an adult and went to Mexico City and saw a mural by Diego Rivera and recognized his portrait, a portrait of his grandfather, that he knew anything about the sort of Haymarket story. The spring of 2011, though, also marked another sort of form of social unrest. So a new governor had taken office in Wisconsin, a man by the name of Scott Walker. One of his first acts was to create a budget in which there weren't not only sort of significant cuts to education and Medicaid, but he also wanted to rethink collective bargaining among sort of public sector employees. People, not only from Wisconsin, but across the country, rallied in the state capital of Madison. And that got me thinking about the sort of connections between past and present. I thought that perhaps part of the reason that Walker was so successful in doing what he was doing is because people didn't really sort of sense or see a continuity between what had occurred in Chicago in 1886 and what was going on in Madison in 2011. And here I have a quotation from Studs Terkel, which I think kind of neatly sums this up. So he talks about something called the United States of Alzheimer's. He's actually kind of riffing on Gore Vidal, who called it the United States of Amnesia. But this sense that, we don't recognize that past and present are one, and then sort of danger in failing to sort of recognize that. So, how did we respond? Well, since 2008, I've been working with a group of writers, artists, musicians on doing a series of sort of public history programs. They're walks, talks, reenactments, and the idea is to take sort of forms that the public are already familiar with, through which history can be narrated, and sort of open them up and make them playful and interactive, to really kind of, blur the distinction between actor and audience. And so for the 120th anniversary of the bombing in Haymarket Square, we decided that we were going to try to do a full-scale sort of reenactment on the actual site. And we didn't want to sort of romanticize labor's past, right? The sort of labor movement of the late 19th and early 20th century, even though I do think that there's a great deal that we can learn from revisiting that history. What we really wanted to do was help to kind of draw out this sort of intimate connection between past and present. It's a simple thing, but oftentimes when we think about the present, we don't consider the fact that it is the result of a whole series of choices, decisions, challenges, and struggles, that it is a made thing, and that everything that we like about our contemporary moment, things that might seem like a given, whether it be child labor laws or food inspection laws, that those things had to be brought into the world through struggles, through decisions, through choices. And in some ways we should take comfort in that. Also, just because, just as the present is a made thing, it's something that can be easily unmade. And I think that's what we saw going on in Wisconsin, that anything that we take as a given in the present moment can easily be sort of taken apart. But we can look to the past and take inspiration from it, and also a warning from it as well. And through doing site-specific interactive events like this, we can also feel that we're part of a continuum, that there were those who came before us and that there'll be those who come after us. And we can feel, just as the people in Madison, through kind of physical proximity and sort of spatial proximity, felt a sense of community, through a kind of better knowledge of the past, you can feel a sort of temporal sense of community, or at least that's what we were hoping for. So how did this come into being? Well, I had a great deal of help. In order to do this to scale and to actually replicate the original event back in 1886, I had to work with people across the city. I had 4 major partners: the Illinois Labor History Society, the Virgin Arts Festival, the Fulton River District Association, and the Haymarket Pub and Brewery. Slightly unlikely collaborators in many senses, but they all had a certain kind of investment in kind of telling this story. Also, I had the assistance of about 30 other arts and cultural organizations across the city. In order to do it to scale, I needed 180 people to volunteer to play Chicago police officers from 1886. And so what we did is we asked all these different organizations and said, if you can provide 5 volunteers, we'll get you guys costumes, we'll give you instructions, and then in our program and on all our sort of online material, we'll list who you are, we'll say what you do, and we'll provide an opportunity for our audience to learn more about you. And then people came out. And here I also have to thank a person by the name of Mairead Case, who really kind of helped me to kind of contact all these groups and organize them all. She's one of those rare people who bridges many different communities in the city. And I couldn't have done this without her and the help of many other people. And as you can see there, unlike sort of Civil War reenactments, we're not too hung up on strict historical accuracy. The idea is that anybody can participate. So you have a gentleman here, a slightly older gentleman. I think our youngest police officer was 7. So we had a nice range. And then the audience that showed up for the reenactment then played the historic audience as well. And so those were the people that you saw the police rushing into in the earlier slide. How did we decide to tell the story? Well, we did the reenactment, and we had it bracketed by basically sort of 2 historical tableaus. One that kind of explained what led up to the bombing in the square, and one that explained its aftermath. And then we had sort of 3 narrators who provided 3 sort of different voices. So Tim Samuelson in the upper left-hand corner is the cultural historian for the city of Chicago, and he provided sort of the official historian's perspective on the events. In the center, we have Alma Washington portraying Lucy Parsons, and so she provided this sort of subjective and sort of personal response to what had occurred. In the bottom right, we have the musician John Langford, who played songs attached with the historical narrative. And I think that's also one of the reasons why, I mean, people often, think that labor songs just represent this kind of misguided nostalgia. But once again, I think part of the appeal of labor songs is that they do create that sort of sense of continuity between past and present. And then, we did, as I said, different tableaus. So we ended it after the sort of bomb went off, after the sort of civil unrest, by doing a sort of tableau of the execution. And I was lucky in that, like, some people who participated in it and played the officers actually kind of wrote about their experiences. So this comes from a blog written by Caroline Picard, who actually was kind of tweeting throughout the entire experience. And she played a police officer, and she sort of kind of made certain to kind of document her experiences, which I actually found very interesting. Because after the bomb went off, she kind of, was there in the actual site and in the actual space, and it kind of helped kind of bridge that gap between past and present. And I think I'll end there. So we're going to do some Q&A now with the three of us. Oh yeah, and I'm always looking for like new ideas and new people to work with. So if you're interested in doing some sort of crazy Chicago historical reenactment, please come up and talk to me at some point this afternoon. We're always looking for new collaborators. We're always open to new ideas. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Eric Triantafilu, and I'm going to speak about my experience working as the art director for SEIU's Take Back Chicago campaign in the fall of 2011 and also in the spring of 2012. Maybe I want to thank the block and the people that put this together, though, because I feel very honored to be here, especially Daniel, Susie, and Michael. This is a great initiative. Okay. So in the fall of 2011, before Occupy started, I was contacted by some of the organizers at SEIU's Stand Up Chicago campaign, which is connected to SEIU's national campaign. They have about 150 branches in different cities around the country. And these campaigns are largely arguing for through various tax systems and whatnot, to get redistribution of various forms of wealth back into schools, employment, and housing. So the Stand Up Chicago office, in around, I want to say maybe like October, came to me and said, hey, would you be willing to come and work with us to be an art director to make essentially propaganda for our campaign? And my background as an artist is in kind of graphic art, printmaking, and I did a lot of sort of street kind of intervention work for many years. So it fit what I do already, and I said, sure, I'll come in. I'd never worked for a union before, so I think I went in really, really naively, not having any idea what to expect. Some of the organizers were my friends, though, personally, and because the Take Back Chicago campaign was organized by them, I had just assumed, I think, that it was going to be something where I would have a kind of constant, back and forth. There would be lots of space for discussion and deliberation. And early on, there was. So the first thing they asked me to do was to find a space that we could work out of. So we found a space in Pilsen. It was a pretty large space. And we started generating all kinds of materials. And one thing that it instantly struck me was that anything I asked for, immediately they came, with all kinds of resources. So nothing was off limits. We set up an entire printmaking shop in the space, which cost thousands of dollars. Anything I said, look, we need this, we need that, they just, boom, it was done. So I'd never worked in a context like that, which was very, in a way, stifling, I think, because one always sort of like with very small budgets where every nickel counts, really, you have to really think about what you're doing. And when all of a sudden all this money and resources are thrown at you, you get very discombobulated very quickly. And at first, I didn't know how to respond. But then I was thinking, wow, they really want to generate a kind of social movement sort of ethos with this project. So I thought, what we need to do is we need to create a space where lots of different people can come and work. And my understanding of what we were doing was precisely that I would be sort of an artist organizer, art director for SEIU, but that I would be able to bring in people, and we had a budget, and I was paid fairly well, and I thought, oh, well, we're going to be bringing artists in, we're going to be able to pay them, they're going to be generating work, there was going to be a degree of autonomy. We generated, the first thing we did was a website to get, kind of get the word out, and so I put this up, and then this was, when I finished the project, this is what the website looked like at the end. And we'd spent quite a bit of money generating this with the web developers and whatnot. But to me, it's indicative of precisely the kind of direction that unions are able to take on the dime, where all of a sudden they've spent all this money and resources developing something that took a lot of effort and energy from a lot of people, and then at the end sort of just shift gears and go in a completely different direction. I also think it's really interesting too, just aesthetically, you see, what's taking place and the difference between those two. So one thing we did is we wanted to sort of pair up with what was going on with Occupy, and so the first thing was to generate an image of a pyramid and relate it to the question of homes, jobs, and schools, and the pyramid sort of having this sense of being toppled. And we started printing all kinds of images in the space. This is a screen print that was then wheat pasted through various campaigns out around Chicago and various neighborhoods. The organizers were really gung-ho at this point. Things were happening very fast. Occupy was sort of like, emerging. So there was a sense in which working in this kind of like really, really tense but exciting kind of, very pregnant moment, that anything was possible. And in this moment, it seemed very clear to me that anything was possible almost from the standpoint of the union. But then this quickly changed. This is the IWW image from 1911 that we used. And I think what's so powerful about this image, well, it's powerful for a lot of reasons, and clearly it speaks to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons, but it's a depiction of social stratification. I think what's wonderful about it, though, is it does keep the question of the sort of social whole on the table, as it were, as an image. And I really think there aren't many images of the social whole that we confront visually, anywhere, in any sort of medium. I think the question of the social whole is a really important question. And it does this in really sort of anachronistic and problematic ways, but still the question of the social whole is there. And at the end, I'm going to ruminate a little bit about what I see as some of the problems with the pyramid as a continual form that the left uses to sort of like symbolize society. So we generated what's called a broadsheet poster. The front side had the image of the toppled pyramid. The back side, we wanted linking up with Occupy to have a kind of 1 in 99% kind of narrative. So on the left, you have the CEO of Bank of America, of Chase, and of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, who had been given all these bailouts post-recession, and were slashing jobs, giving themselves huge raises, and receiving tax increment finance from the city to basically stay in the city. On the right, we juxtapose them with unemployed nurse, an unemployed college graduate, and an unemployed machine tool worker. We produced these in Spanish. And we printed, if I remember correctly, it was something like 50,000 of each, maybe a little less on the Spanish, but I'd never printed something in that quantity before either. And they showed up in boxes at the space one day, and they were just like box after box after box, and they kept bringing them in. I thought, wow, this is amazing. We have to find ways to really distribute these. And at the first Occupy protest in October, I think it was October 11th, we distributed them pretty widely. They were all over the place. People were reading them. It was really great. This was, if people were there, if they remember, one of the signs that got made. Okay, and then this was a banner that was dropped out of, it was a building across from the Art Institute on Michigan Avenue. We tried to do quite a few of these types of things, where we would sort of scan a space beforehand and figure out how we could get something to hang out of a window. This piece was about 200 pounds. It was very heavy. And the people that did it were worried, the two people that were tasked with doing it, were worried that if it fell out of the window, it could fall on and kill someone below. And so they had been talking to the organizer, the union organizer, and saying, look, we need to find a better way to deal with this. And the union organizer was very dismissive of them and said, look, no, we're doing this, and if you don't want to do it, we'll find somebody else, you know. And so I started to notice very quickly that in any kind of deliberative moment with the union organizers, and these were basically younger people, like in their 30s, that there was a whole relationship that they had to the people that were in the space of a kind of very instrumentalized role. And my role became very quickly that. From one where I would have conversations with people about how we should be working, the types of images we should be generating, the kinds of people we should be working with. Early on, these were very open and rich discussions, and pretty soon I realized my role had just completely fallen to, here's your directive, go and do it. We're not interested in what you think, basically. So what I would propose quite often is, why don't we, instead of making images like that, you know, look like essentially red, white, and blue electoral politics campaigning, why don't we really try to push the question of getting these images to be something that people can really sink their teeth into? So let's roll large banners out in the space. Let's get people in here. Let's have them write whatever way they want on them. Let's make kind of these very Pollock-esque, process-oriented pieces so that when they go up in public space, people see these and get very excited about them because A, they were part of generating these, and they see a little bit of themselves out there. So this was, to me, a kind of way that we could kind of at least deal with the question of propaganda in a somewhat more sort of autonomous kind of relationship as opposed to totally instrumentalized. So this was the Art Institute protest, and I put this in because it really did feel like, I don't know if anybody was there, but it had this kind of storming the castle quality to it. We did hire some tumblers that generated a human pyramid that fell, you know, again and again to the kind of uproarious roar of the audience. It was the artist in California, Robbie Herbst, did his version of a human pyramid. This is at Occupy LA. November 17th, there was a series of bridge occupations that happened also nationwide on the LaSalle Street Bridge that was going to walk down to the Board of Trade at the end. And we developed signs. So this would be one of the moments where I had gone to the management and said, look, these signs need to be something that is clearly representative of the different kinds of people that generated them. No, we just want blue, you know, sign with the words that we have on it. Same with the Board of Trade image. The one really nice thing about these kinds of images, though, is that when you can make something this big and when you put it up, when we put this up at the Board of Trade, I remember the sort of of all the people there, because it really does. You don't see something this big in this kind of space usually, where you really feel like there's a kind of imposition of these large spaces, and when you can put something in that space that kind of, in a little bit of a small sense, takes it over, it's a kind of interesting and lovely feeling. So as the more time I spent with this project, the more my role became more and more sort of completely just as a tool. So we started generating all this stuff that I felt more and more sort of just completely disconnected from. And it was bigger, and it was about being bigger, but ultimately anything I had to offer in terms of any kind of creativity, or you know, I had pitched them on having classes to teach rank and file union members how to make certain things. We would have messaging meetings where organizers would come in, sit with rank and file folks in a group, and essentially just give them like talking points for the media. Like, you want to make a sign? Here's something you could make it about. And then when the organizers would leave, and I would have a lot of time with the union members just to talk, they would have all kinds of interesting things to say. And they had very radical kind of standpoints that they wanted to, you know, emblematize or symbolize in imagery that never sort of made it, as it were, through this kind of like cordon that the union had in kind of controlling its messaging and making everything kind of like, you know, stick to the sort of general message that they wanted to push, which I agree with in a lot of ways. But I think what was troubling for me was that I felt there was a way, and maybe that there could be a way to generate imagery that was coming from the individuals that were making it, that could at the same time express a kind of collective, even though it would have very different sort of like stances that it was coming from, different kind of subject positions, like different types of experiences could express something about these issues that we're all, you know, very concerned with. So I wanted to end with this slide, because I think this is something that I find very indicative of where we've come from. So you see the yellow line is the share of income going to the top 1%. And you see that there's this kind of inverse direction that the graph takes of union membership. When union membership is very high, the redistribution of wealth it was the greatest it was. And this was sort of a Fordist welfare state period. So we're talking about from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and early 70s. And that completely tails off. And that now we're in this sort of reverse relationship again, as it was kind of like, as people are talking about, as a kind of early Gilded Age. And I think that this, to me, is a great place to begin to think about what the possibilities for not just artists, but as somebody, I think it was John Murphy said at the beginning, like just people that are concerned and finding those shared sets of concerns and what those are, finding spaces to articulate them, is really where we need to be. And most often, this is a very difficult thing to do when people are working very different types of jobs and don't have the time. And so the question of time and the question of being able to have the space and the time, I think, is essential too. So this is, for me, a very great opportunity, and I hope that there's possibilities for us thinking about how we would actually interpret something like this and what it represents together. Thank you.
I'm going to be a free-range person today. All right, my name is Don Washington, and I'm going to give you a very tiny sliver of a mayoral tutorial. This usually is an interactive, educational, agitational town hall meeting. There are 3 rules to every mayoral tutorial. Rule number 1, tutorial is interactive. You'll be forced to interact with someone in this room at some point today. There is also no place to hide. Rule number 2, tutorial is educational. Everyone here has something to teach and something to learn. Prepare yourselves. Rule number 3, the tutorial is agitational. You may hear things that may want to make you slap the taste out of someone's mouth. Don't do it. It's rude. So that being said, we'll begin with the interaction. Everyone, rise to your feet. Rise. Come now, rise, my friends, rise. We don't have much time. Time is running against us. Have we risen? Have we risen? That's what I'm talking about. And now, in your loudest, most intorial tones, I want to hear you say, welcome to the mayoral tutorial. Welcome to the mayoral tutorial. Oh, this is fantastic. Now we're going to do it for real now. We're going to do it for real with 3-part harmony and incitement. On the count of 3, 1, ye. That's Korean. Thrice. Welcome to the mayoral tutorial. All right, it's good. It's fantastic. Let's see. I was listening. Let's see who sounded great. Yeah, you. Come on down. Come down. Hurry up. Give a round of applause. Yeah, you there. Come with me, come. Let's see, you, way over there in the red scarf. You're in the black sweater and the red scarf. You know who you are. Yes, you, go down. All right, take your chairs. Take chairs. Time is running against us. We only have 10 minutes. Everybody else, stay standing. Stay standing. We're not done yet. Unless you can't stand, in which case you can relax. I know who you are. What's your name, sir?
Mark Paternostro.
Your name?
Julia.
Oh, speak into the fancy microphones.
Julia.
Alex.
You're going to be my human buzzers. At some point, you'll be forced to make a buzzing noise when someone wants to buzz in. We're going to test you. I want you to do your best human buzzer noise, whatever it is. Human buzzers, loud.
Ding, ding, ding.
I'm a little
ding,
worried about loud.
Ding.
Human buzzer, soft. Human buzzer, completely confused. Fantastic! Give him a round of applause.
You guys are putting me to shame.
And now for the rest of you, for my guessers, with a sophisticated thing that you must do. You must complete this sentence at the top of your lungs. You all know how it ends. We're just going to see who knows what they're doing here today. The sentence is fee, fi, fo. Very good. Let's see. Miss? Yes, you in the checkered. Come down. Come to me. Come on. Excellent. Well done. Sir, let's go. Get a move on. Running out of time. Where do they go? It's always one person way in the back hiding out, praying to God I won't call on them. I sensed the prayer. I found the guy. Come on. It's always, I like to go to the back. There's always one guy going, please, God, I didn't say anything. I don't want to talk today. That's the best guy to have up here. Okay. What's your name, ma'am?
Lisa.
Ben.
Mitch.
Choose your buzzer. Go ahead. Go on. You will be answering the questions on privatization. In this, the ragtag bag of reality, where bad things happen to good people, which is us. The rest of you may now sit down. Go ahead. All right, here's how this works. One of you will reach into the bag and take out a question. You will then read the question and answers aloud. At which point, you'll hand me the piece of paper. It's cool, we're just talking among ourselves.
All right.
I'll step back.
Okay.
And then when you're ready to buzz in, hit your buzzer, and your buzzer will make the proper buzzer noise. And then you'll have to answer the question.
But am I supposed to read the question and the answer?
Just read the question. Oh, go ahead.
You said read the question and the answer, but I wanted to know if I should read the answer and the question at the same time.
I may have just learned something. You just have to read the question, then hand it back to me.
Okay, yeah.
And then, because I want to be fair to everybody else, and then I'll nod, and then whoever's ready when they answer just jumps in. Now, this is a very erudite crowd. I expect y'all have read the paper. People should know the answer to these questions. Oh, God, no. No, gee, we'll be here all night. I got like 3 minutes left. Always somebody want to help. Can I play? No, Daniel, you cannot. Unbelievable. Came all this way. Reach inside. You can do it. Okay. I got faith in you. You're good. You got this. Don't you panic. I'll stand here right next to you. All right, you ready? All right, what's the question?
The first name.
No, what is the question?
Oh, sorry. What is CP3?
What is CP3? They don't know. Go ahead.
The first name of an amazingly annoying robot. An initiative that gathers information from the Chicago Office of Emergency Management and Communications, the Chicago Fire Department, the Chicago Department of Environment, and the Chicago Police Department. A partnership between Chicago's first responders to provide information to the private sector on best responses to crisis situations, or a public-private partnership to change the way Chicago contracts with private entities to put it more in line with the Patriot Act.
I'm going to take this. Whenever you're ready, Answer? Who thinks they have an answer?
Ding, ding, ding.
Very good. Which one is it?
The last one, the Patriot Act one?
What's the answer?
The Patriot Act answer.
That is incorrect. It's okay. No, it's okay. You could just, well, thank you. Applause for the buzzer. Wow. We have like really aggressive buzzers. Let's turn on their master. All right, this is the thing. This is all about privatization. I'll have one more question. Let them guess. We're almost out of time. This is about privatization. And what I want you to know is that your government is cutting deals with people that you did not vote for, whose job it is to make a gross profit off of your tax dollars in a way that you have no say over, so that you're forever subsidizing their profits, period. That's all there is to it. It's not more efficient, doesn't save any money, just a way to make some cash with some guys that don't do any work. That being said, the answer is, it's an initiative involving the emergency management people, the Chicago Fire and Police Department, and what they're doing is they are allowing private corporations to take some information they're all gathering, right, and then sell it back to the city so they will know how to better manage crises. I know what you're thinking. What the? Be cool. Vote better next time. All right. Since you answered and you read, that's what I'm talking about. Guy who knows what's up.
Seems only fair.
Reach in. Reach deep. Don't be scared. Oh, perfect. Please let it be the Godzilla one.
Sorry.
What's the question?
The question is, how much money did Chicago lose on the parking meter deal?
Fine question. Hey, easy. You voted for this.
First option, none. We made a mint. Mayor Daley was a financial genius.
Possible.
2, we broke even. Public-private partnerships are not about profit. They are about public service from private companies. 3, no, it cost us $974 million over a 75-year lease. We got screwed. No. Well, there's one more option.
You get the go in the answer. What's the last one?
No, it cost us a minimum of $974 million over the 75-year lease. We got screwed bad.
What's the answer?
4.
Give a round of applause. That is correct. Here is the evil, bad mojo about a public-private partnership. You see, when you have a public resource, say a parking meter, and you're sitting around thinking to yourself, my God, we got to raise money for children in schools. You could raise the fees in certain parts of the city, on certain kinds of people, at certain times of the day. You could. But let's say you sell it. Let's just say you did that. Let's just say you lost your mind, sold it. You got drunk, you did too much blow, you sold it. These things happen. When you sell a public asset, the people who buy the public asset, it's a little bit like buying a used car. They give you a lump sum. It's like winning the lottery and saying, I'll take all $475 million, please, thank you. When you run out of that money, you don't have any more. Then what they get to do is they get to decide how much you pay to park. I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a terrible idea. I know what happened. It happened to all of us, and we voted for it. Now, first of all, give these people a round of applause. You may all return to your chairs. That is a small thing that we do in the Mayo tutorial. I am about to leave the stage, but I want to say 3 things before I go. Thing number one, democracy is a contact sport. If you're not directly engaged in it, something bad's supposed to happen to you. Go get engaged. Thing number 2, each and every one of us has an obligation, the people we've not even met yet, to make sure the world works the way it's supposed to. If it's not working that way, it's your fault, which means it's our fault. So get off your ass, do something about it. Thing number 3 is my favorite thing to say. It's something that I say at the end of every show. When I was a little kid, I was like, before I went to Korea, so I must have been like 5. My grandfather, the most hardcore, intense guy ever, makes me look calm and timid. If I became a Republican or a conservative, he'd come back from the grave to haunt me. He would do it. And it'd be one of those scary hauntings like The Shining. My grandfather once said to me, I was 5, he said, democracy is the battle that never ends. You're either fighting for something or losing everything. Don't you be the prick rat bastard. Did I mention I was 5? He's hardcore. He said, don't you be the prick rat bastard that gives away someone's rights today because you could not get directly involved in democracy. So go out and get involved. I'll see y'all later. Bye.
All right, so we're gonna have Eric and Don stay on stage. Our anonymous presenter will not be present for Q&A, nor the avatar. So I'm gonna start in this direction. We have about 10 minutes to do Q&A, and then Michael will be over there, and please raise your hand and if you have things to say. Okay.
I have a question for Eric. You said that you were going to talk about the use of the pyramid on the left to depict society, but you didn't get into that so much in your talk, so I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about it. You said it was potentially problematic symbolization of society as a whole.
Yeah. It's kind of complex, but the gist of it is that I think in trying to represent social stratification as something hierarchical, that is that, so there's sort of people at the top, the 1%, that are sort of dominating everyone else. I think what that does is it kind of in a way gets us off the hook. I know people like to have enemies, and there's a way in which historically, the left has kind of set its eye on a certain set of enemies, and these enemies tend to be personified in people. And they tend to be sort of the 1%. And I think that's by and large, there's plenty of people doing, what we would think of as unethical kind of things, all across the strata. And that, of course, when you're in a position of power, the kinds of things that you do have really, really deleterious effects for a lot of people. But I think what it does is, in a way, it lets us off the hook from sorting to think about what is it about the very system of social organization we have that people, whether you come from sort of like, a social class that as it were is at the top, or whether you're a worker at the bottom or whatnot, we all share. And I think that it's that system of social organization that's sort of elided in the image of a pyramid. And as much as the kind of work it does to be a really powerful image, it also obfuscates, I think, kind of a larger set of more profound questions, possibly, that I think, unless we really begin to deal with and really think through, that we're only ever going to be sort of dealing with, like, kind of what are the names and addresses of those polluters, and how can we get them either regulated or in jail. But the real system, the underlying system that I think provides for the possibilities for these kinds of actions to have such huge effects is really kind of not on the table. And I think in union politics, of course, obviously, it's not. Because if you have to live in a society where survival is predicated on employment, you have to demand employment. But as we look around, it's not hard, you can increasingly see that employment is more and more superfluous. Jobs are more and more superfluous. And as things mechanize, as technological innovation creates or renders certain types of labor superfluous, we're facing a future in which, unless we think about what kind of production we're doing and what kind of society we're organizing, the question of, who's at the top and who's at the bottom is.
Okay, there's a question here.
I guess I'm a little confused about the term social practice, and I wonder whether you consider yourself artist first or social practice, or whether social practice is going to get in the way of your art, or and then my second question is, perhaps a little heretical. You've created all these objects which many might consider art. Many do, some might not, but they become commodified and available for somebody to buy and end up in the Chicago Historical Society or whatever. And kind of like, how do you feel about that?
So I can answer the social practice work. I am not an artist. I'm not even a comedian. I'm just a guy. So I do research and investigative work. That's what I do, right? And the tutorial is just another way to connect the people, to drag them into the world of being directly involved. That's all I do. In fact, I didn't even plan to be here. There are a bunch of volunteers that run the tutorial, and they kind of task me to do things. And that's how I got tasked to be here today, is that they, over the last 3 months, I don't know when Daniel and those guys connected, but they brought me here. So I think that it's all about the social practice of being directly engaged in the levers of power. There's only two kinds of power, organized people and organized money, and they have a lot of money. So we're going to have to really get engaged and have real strong critiques and then direct ways to actually impact them, or they're going to keep doing what they're doing to us. And when I say they, let me be clear. I do think that it comes down to what individuals are doing. I'm one of the folks that helped craft the moratorium on the death penalty in this state. And until we were able to figure out what motivated George Ryan, who was our governor at that point, to put the right kind of pressure on him, we were getting nowhere. We were raising awareness, but we weren't actually impacting them. It has reached the point where an individual like the guys that run Sarah Walton, I think it's Sarah Walton, one of the Walton founders, when she goes to her country club and someone goes, "Sarah, are you killing small children? You are terrible, Sarah." When she can't go to her country club without hearing, when she goes to her country club and starts hearing that kind of stuff over and over again, she will change. She will not change as long as she gets to live in her comfortable bubble. We have to be about removing the bubble.
Well, obviously, you two have both sort of posited different kind of perspectives on the idea of sort of personifying power. So I don't know if you also want to respond to that, Eric, but I'm sure some other people have questions, and then we can also take up some of the broader themes and debates in our open forum session in a little while. We'll go to someone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to mention that from the performance by Anonymous, a lot of the techniques that were used for social protest in Europe, where she was describing in Russia, you can find them in a wonderful book called How to Start a Revolution by Gene Sharp. Gene Sharp is kind of the guy who created a small pamphlet to guide people into very effective social protest techniques. A lot were used during the Arab Spring. So I highly recommend looking up Gene Sharp's book, How to Start a Revolution. Number two, I'm very inspired by Mr. Washington in that we wake up and actually make contact about issues of social protest in the actual direct form of speaking to the people right now. I want to say we're at Northwestern University. There's a lot of money that is invested in different kinds of stocks and different kinds of commodities. I highly recommend the teachers and the students in this room to work to divest from fossil fuel stocks as a part of 350 and their initiative. This is something that can be done right here at Northwestern University, and I highly encourage it because the future is going to be a really big problem if we don't get stock divestment from fossil fuels through our universities. This was successful in the push for changing South Africa, and it's the strategy we're going to be doing again. And I really am very inspired by Mr. Washington about direct speech about what can be done here. Also, students on, got to be happening here, right here in Northwestern. I'm saying it now. Another thing, the student debt crisis. Students, if you don't have an organization that's somehow working towards that sort of social justice, This is a good time to be thinking about it. I'd like to know if it exists. Maybe we could talk during the break. Okay? Direct democracy, man.
Great. We're going to take one more question, and then I want to let people know that the open session really is intended to foster this kind of debate. We are aware that there are a lot of questions and issues in the House, and we do want to look at them. So we'll take one more question, and then I'll just let you know now, after this, we're going to invite you to head next door to the Block Museum. We'll break for about 15 minutes, and then we want to come back here at 3:25 because we have a rich afternoon. There are several routes into this building, some that are more accessible than others. And so many of you came in this upstairs route. We are going to be inviting you to come in a back way, which is the way that is accessible to the stage. People from the block will be inviting you that way. So over at the block, you can find me, other people will be able to guide you back in the different directions.
This is to Eric, consistent with my question in the first session about rebellion against hierarchy. There seems a variation about this in how you recounted your experience with the union, which is the union invited you in to use your creativity and radical art to help move forward their movement and their actions, but in the end you said they suppressed your creativity. So what happened there?
I maybe framing it as suppressing my own creativity. I don't remember saying that, but if I did say that, it's much more, I think, a general ethos within large institutions that have very specific goals in mind. That there's a sort of compelling sense in which they have to function and operate in a certain way. And so if you're an institution that's trying to re-elect Obama, for example, and you give $28 million to the re-election campaign, which they did in 2012, which was the largest single donation to the Obama re-election campaign from any organization in the country, which comes from dues money. Their whole logic is hitched up to a particular end, and everything that they do is toward that end. So I think that the way they see all of the things that happen in these small spaces, in these 150 branches, is geared toward that end. What this means, I think, in practice, in their daily sort of interactions with the people that they hire and the people they work with, is precisely this idea that people are just warm bodies. A lot of people in the Occupy protests that were part of the union were paid to be there. The union uses its resources, which are vast, to, for example, grab the tail of Occupy, the comet of Occupy, like bring tents, food, generators, all kinds of material resources to Occupy as it was happening. Now, I think that's great, but what I think the problem that happened clearly in some of the issues within Occupy and the union, like for example in New York City when they were going over the Brooklyn Bridge, the protest organizers within SEIU diverted, because they had a relationship with the New York City police, they diverted the protesters off of the bridge, the traffic, the car lanes, into the pedestrian, precisely because they wanted to maintain a kind of relationship with the authorities, whereas the Occupy protesters really wanted to be on the bridge to shut it down. And it's these kinds of things that the Occupy movement sees in relation to the union, because the union has to maintain a certain type of relationship with vis-a-vis power and authority. And I think in the sense with Occupy, what I saw is that Occupy the people there did not want to maintain that relationship. Now, they didn't want to maintain it at varying degrees. Some people were more militant than others. But it was clear that the union has to maintain a kind of quid pro quo vis-a-vis authority. And that limits, I think, all kinds of what we might call creativity and forms of maybe degrees of autonomy. So that might be at the level of messaging. So for example, all those posters we made, 50,000, after we started the first distribution, they sat in boxes for the next 6 months. Somebody in DC did not like the imagery because it had an image of class struggle, I think, and they were not distributed. And to me, I couldn't understand how so much energy, so much money had gone into the generation of this. Clearly, so many people really liked the message, and then they just sat there. So it's, my understanding would be much more, and working within the union, I think, that we could maybe push the union a little bit more toward forms of autonomy as being sort of emergent forms of new ways of thinking. Because you never know what's going to happen. But if you only have your logic hitched up to getting someone reelected, then everything is pretty much expendable, I think.
I do want to say one, I think he's absolutely right. I do want to say one quick thing, though. One of the big struggles that's going on right now in the organizing world, of which I'm a practitioner, right, is this huge argument between relational ways of dealing with the world and transactional ways of dealing with the world. And I'm happy to say the relational ways are beginning to win. But when you spend, the union movement has spent, and I wouldn't say the union movement, the left has spent the last, I would say, 40 years being really transactional, right? The lesser, I call it lesser evilism. And I like to say, lesser is still lesser and evil is still evil, right? So I think it's really important to realize that what's happening is that what happened to Eric and what happens to people who do this work every day is that you're caught in that constant fight between relational and transactional ways of dealing. And movement building at bottom is about relationships and understanding some shared values and then taking action on them. And when you get hamstrung in your shared values and you're transactional, not relational, bad things are supposed to happen to you. You pick bad candidates, you can't move issues, and you can't inspire people to get into action because they feel betrayed. Because you don't win enough significant things, you don't fight for who they are and what they desire, right? And you end up with a society that looks like a compromise between evil and really evil. That sucks.
So I'm going to just run down here. I want to do just a couple quick things. First, I'd like to invite a thanks for all of the folks who have come up on stage so far. I think that we've gotten a really great grounding. In a lot of case studies and some polemics and questions. And I want to just point out that we really encourage you to come back after this break and that we still have a presentation to come, we have a performance to come. And in terms of the open session, Anthony and Nicole, who you heard in the beginning with a call, are going to be working to facilitate actually bringing into dialogue some of the issues that have been raised so far, but we're really looking also to you to bring your questions and issues. So this is going to be a point to be able to actually begin to dig into the meat a little bit more of some of the questions on the table. So please do come back, and then at the end of the day, we are going to close with a reception. The galleries are going to be open until 6:30, so please stick around and join us now next door. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here, to Daniel and to Susie and to Michael. I'm very appreciative, and it's really wonderful to have been at the other presentations and talks this morning, or this afternoon, morning. So of course, one of the questions that was asked, or the provocations that inspired these proceedings, was what should revolutionary artists do today? In many senses, and given my subject for inquiry, the most unrevolutionary thing that an artist can do today is talk, converse, pontificate, speak. But really, the plentiful opportunities for artists to speak and address the ideas and the research methods that inform their work and engagements does not lessen or reduce the need for artist speech acts to take place. I am especially interested in the settings for the talk, speech, dialogue, etc., and most notably the fact that with the chat and the talk and the speech also comes a community of listeners and onlookers. The histories of historical settings for speaking, such as the Speaker's Corner in London's Hyde Park, formalized around 1866, where Marx and William Morris and George Orwell and Marcus Garvey, among many, many others, often addresses the right for freedom of speech. So this context often addresses, the histories of these different sites often address the right of speech, but also, interestingly enough, the right of assembly. And it's that kind of right of assembly that's been really interesting to me, and really pulls from and draws from previous research and interest in a kind of mapping of the assembled bodies and how those help to produce certain artistic outcomes, artistic expressive outcomes in the American context in the 1920s, where mob scenes actually helped in their own weird, bizarre way to motivate and inspire a genre of ethnicity films within the Black and the Jewish communities, respectively. So sort of how race and ethnicity films are motivated by or produced in many ways as a reaction to mobs. And these are kind of really angry, excited mobs, you know, that are against, again, either Blacks or Jews, respectively, at around the turn of the century. So this interest in assembly that I have now is one that follows from that interest in the excitement, the pleasure of assembly and convening, and its connection to artistic cultures and possibilities, film in the 1920s and other things now, but it has a different inflection. These are not necessarily pernicious mobs and assembly formations, but those that are a little bit more welcoming and I would say neighborly. The formal proliferation of the idea of the historical setting for speech acts exists in most municipalities and is fashioned in some way to the culture and the moral ethic expectations of that given culture. This would be codes of conduct, such as those in Lichtfield. These are ways of thinking about how one should construct the speaking environment. It has to do a lot with aspects of respect and politesse and all of that. So what is often what is so often articulated as the fundamental rights of citizens to gather together, to hear and be heard, has much to do with how I am at present querying the locations, the places, the platforms, and the scaffolding that support and perpetuate art making. And so this is art making in the present day. So example, I consider the physical site at 43rd and Langley, which in 1967 was the place of the Wall of the Respect, as an important place for connecting and convening around the banner of Black consciousness, and art making that emerges from that consciousness, again, because for me, all of these mobilization of bodies and these acts of congregation and assembly have so much to do with, again, the artistic opportunities that avail around it. So in 1967, the Wall of Respect is one of these places where there was not just a sort of visual articulation on a building, on the physical front of the architecture at that corner, but also regular visits by artists and poets. So Gwen Brooks, Joe Jarman, sorry that photo is so wonky, Joe Jarman, Roscoe Mitchell, others. This is for me in line with the types of podiums or settings where oral speech and embodied expressive acts can take place and help to produce this gathering of people. Similarly, I am just back from Dakar, like 48 hours ago, where I spoke about this as well. In the 1977, through the construction of elaborate and ornate structure, the National Theater, which was produced for the occasion of a uniquely Pan-African Artists Congress, the Second World Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture, which took place in Lagos at the time in 1977, and which was known as Festex 77. So at Festex 77, artists such as Jeff Donaldson of Afrocobra were in attendance, as well as many American musical performers, etc. Other contexts might include Alice Yard, so that's actually Donaldson at Festac. I'm a little delayed on my slide. Other contexts might include Alice Yard, which brings to bear in all of this the ethos of the yard as a logistic for artistic expression. It is a backyard space, literally, in Port of Spain, Trinidad. And the way that this is framed is as 4 generations of children played and imagined in this yard. And now we continue this tradition, Alice Yard, as a space for creative experiment, collaboration, and improvisation. I'll say something about that at the end. One of the artists who's connected with the founding of Alice Yard, who helps to program it, is Chris Cozier. Is Chris Cozier here? Chris? Okay. Yeah, no, I know I'm going to say something to this later. But Chris is on campus this semester through Northwestern, and he is one of the founders of this space. So that's Alice Yard. So this brings me to one of the things, I'm going to kind of stick with this rhetoric of things that Don offered to us. One of the things that I was asked to broach and speak about and pull together in relationship to my research interests, which is an exhibit, a show that I'm working on for the Chicago Cultural Center to open in 2015. That's called Let Me Clear My Throat, for now, New Podium Works. Here I am also interested in the specific spaces or scenes from which impacting intellectual or artistic outcomes evolve. I am concerned with a particular spatial phenomenon which provides the contemporary artist a platform for his or her thoughts. Derived from the Greek podion, a diminutive of pos, pod, and foot, even in the most literal sense, the podium offers the contemporary artist's footing, or a place to position the ideas and methods that inform their practice. An archetype of contemporary visual arts culture, the podium event, usually articulated as an artist talk or conversation or contribution to a panel, is in addition to art historical scholarship and art criticism, a revered mode at this point in time. Let Me Clear My Throat, the exhibit considers the significance of the podium moment to contemporary visual arts culture. And this is actually so very entrenched that the document 13, for example, offered congresses which spoke to the, I quote, different morphologies from the free academies that were initiated by artists from the late 1960s onto the many temporary structures that they are inventing in order to present works and ideas today, end quote. These structures and contexts might be exaggerated and made to have more bearing on the artist's speech and talk. The expectations, in many senses, that have accrued around the podium moment have become kind of stale in a way, and not because there are too many words spoken, as I said earlier, but because their revolutionary heft does not challenge the architecture or structural edifices. For the project, I seek work that innovates in this direction. Part of the revolutionary import of words and speech based on congresses is in how they force the matter of aggregation and assembly. And to this, I want to go back to the mention of Alice Yard and Chris Cozier as a way to move into some sort of impactful thinking around what one might do as a response to artist talks and speech acts, et cetera. So as I mentioned, Alice Yard was founded by Cozier. Cozier is literally on campus. Most likely he's at the Richard Eiton conversation and conference that is going on right at this moment at the Orrington Hotel. And I guess part of what I imagine, right, and this is again within the contours of you know, I think we act and do things within the contours of being respectful to this paradigm, the paradigm of a podium, the paradigm of our time constraints, the paradigm of producers and people who spend a lot of energy and labor making these productions. And I will say that I've been on that side. A lot of my interest here comes from these kind of issues in assembly, as I mentioned earlier, and how those connect to arts practice. It also comes from a very sort of practical relation to methods and practices of program making. And if there's any sort of curating that I do and have done, it is what I call discourse curatorial. I've for a long time not been invested in object curatorial, but through my work through the education department at Studio and other things, have been involved in sort of how ideas can be put together, merged, and bridged through conversation. So I'm really invested in this. But back to the imagining. What I imagine is how the form of the lecture, the talk, et cetera, can exist and at the same time be nimble enough to collapse its effort, give up in the effort as it pursues new engagements and forms of intellectual, social, and aesthetic neighborliness. And I really loved that language that you brought to bear at the beginning of the conference about neighborliness. And so this imagining, and I'll just have it in my head, is that, you know, we would get up and sort of walk over to the Richard Eaton conference because there are so many speakers and practitioners and makers and thinkers there who have so much also to share with us, and that we have so much to share with in terms of these conversations conversations. So again, what Chris could say about Alice Yard is much more deeply penetrating than I can say. I've been there, I've been at the space in Trinidad, but he has so much to offer there. And there are other speakers, a woman, Shauna Redmond, who, when I was in Dakar 2 days ago, has done a really interesting work on the to-do lists of Paul Robeson. And of course, Paul Robeson was so active as a socialist, and he actually had to-do lists which read like manifestos, but they were very sort of personally inspired. She's over there. My point is that would be an imagining, and maybe if I'm not able to do that today and we're not able to do it, that we can in future imagine being at talks which allow, which exist but also collapse in the very moment that they're taking place. Thank you.
It's okay, you didn't have to go anywhere. All right, welcome back, welcome back. We'll get some more. So we're now going to segue into the open session, which is much more informal, hence the Miles Davis. That's how you can tell informality. But I want to start by thanking you all for being here. If you started with us at 1 o'clock this afternoon, congratulations, we made it. Give yourselves a round of applause. Give the speakers another round of applause. It's been a lot to absorb, and we very much appreciate you being present with us in this moment. Revolution, art, democracy, social change, representation, accessibility, the list could go on, and we are certainly brimming with these thoughts and these sensations, and if you were standing in the middle of that circle, feelings, you may be overwhelmed by emotions, as I am right now. But the way the open session is going to run is that we are going to invite you all to join us on stage if you like. If you don't like, you're welcome to stay seated. You're also welcome to move a little bit closer. It's a lot more informal, so you're going to want to arrange yourself and be thinking beforehand about how you might want to talk with the people around you, what kinds of conversations you might want to think through, what kind of subjects. Any of the speakers that you saw that you may want to dig in a little bit deeper, maybe conversations you had over the break. So be thinking about that. But first, we are going to invite you. Nicole's going to lead us through a little bit of a breathing exercise, through a little bit of embodied practice, get back into these bodies of ours. Remember that we're persons and not just audiences sitting in this proscenium, but that we are people with hearts and blood. And then we're going to invite you to break out a little bit, and we'll be asking people to lead little mini conversations if you like. If you have topics that are burning, as I said, then we'll ask that you just raise your hand, say what you want to talk about, and then we can gather folks around you. It's also really informal, so if you want to move between conversations, that's great as well. And then after that, we'll reconvene as a body, as a single collective entity, and share some of those thoughts. This open call, this call for imperatives had been circulating prior to this Congress, so if anyone has thoughts about what the Congress should do as a whole, or how we might use this Congress in the future, or how we might leverage these new relationships, these new conversations, that's also a possibility. And then if we have enough time, we're running a little bit late on time, so we're going to shrink this just a tiny bit and go until about 5:10, 5:15. But we'll try to include enough time there at the end that if anyone wants to make announcements about projects that you're working on and solicit collaborations or solicit partnerships, then we'll try to include a little bit of time for that as well. So yet another possibility for using's an appropriate term, but for gathering with other people in the room. So without further ado.
Thanks, Anthony. So I thought it might be nice before we start our conversations to just take a moment, and I would like to invite you to just get in touch with your breath. Sometimes during tense moments, we can forget to breathe or start breathing very shallowly. So I just like to invite you to inhale and exhale somewhat intentionally. And then I would also like to invite you to take a moment, and if you can, wherever you are, just try to put your feet on the floor. And while you're there and while you're breathing, just feel your feet inside of your shoes, like sort of move your toes around and feel the surfaces of your feet contact your shoes and the floor and therefore the earth. And the surfaces of your legs, if you're sitting in contact with the chair, all of those surfaces and the weight of gravity and just that connection. Because of course there are floors and these artificial structures, but really we're just on the earth, connecting right back down to the earth. And then what I'd like to invite you to do is take your hand as you're able and put it over your heart. And just feel that. At the Revolutionary Artists Congress, we should be singing some other kinds of revolutionary songs, right? I am not singing the national anthem to the United States of America, no. But I will feel my heart. Also like to just take a moment and remember that we are on sacred ground, stewarded for generations and generations by indigenous people, especially right here near this beautiful lake. Those people were no fools. Remember all the people that built this space that we're working in and sitting in, as problematic as we might think it is. All the hands and the labor and materials that went into making these chairs that we get to sit in. One last breath. Oh, very good, very good. Excellent. So, at this time also, as we move into conversations, just want to really encourage folks to remember as you are able that the small group discussions are going to be short. So if you are feeling the need, for example, to like sit this way and talk to a person, you probably can do that for about 15 minutes, you know what I'm saying? Or just, so as we're having conversations, to try to figure out how to arrange your bodies in a way that you can actually look at each other and smell each other and listen to each other and stuff like that. So I think at this point we're gonna call for convening conversations, right, Anthony?
Yeah, so if anyone, just raise your hand if you're like, I really want to talk about education, prison industrial complex, access, anything that you really want to talk about, just raise your hand. We'll come to you, say what you want to talk about, and then if anyone's interested, you can gather around this person.
Hey, Anthony, one thing I was thinking is maybe we can hear what all the conversations are, and then we can all move at once.
Sounds great.
Okay, great.
What I want to say is something like the period that we're in right now is fundamentally different from the period of the 30s, and revolutionary art today means something considerably different than it meant then. The fight against fascism then was a fight against something that was much more intentional. The fight against fascism today, fascism was much more intentional. Today, it's objectively developing at a very rapid rate, and we're really, so the question of what is revolutionary art today is something that I really think is important to talk about.
Awesome. We will do that. Okay, we've got one down here. Mark.
Commodification. You can fight it or you can co-opt it. And co-opting commodification would mean putting artworks to work to support culture.
Fantastic. Okay, so commodification, and then go ahead.
I'm interested in non-violent anarchism with a stress on tax resistance as a way of resolving the problem in a non-violent revolutionary manner.
Great.
Fantastic.
We've got one here.
I would like to talk about collective action and how it correlates with conformity and losing ideals in the pursuit of achieving social change.
Thank you. Got one over there.
Yeah, I want to talk about what Paul started to discuss, which is Scott Walker and the two sides of that story and how artists can play a role in reforming institutions on like both sides of the political spectrum. I think that Don started talking about that, or not Don, Eric started talking about that with his work with the union, and I want to get that conversation going a bit more.
Thank you.
I think a lot of these questions are circling around and around a subject that I want to clarify as simply as possible. We've been talking about the nationalist form of fascism from the 30s as the thing that social movements countered. I think what we're coming to today is a term that Chris Hedges used in some of his books, and I think it's very accurate. What we have today, the American form, is actually corporate fascism. And that's a situation in which the corporation has a tremendous amount of control over everything that we have in our lives, our health insurance, whether or not we get Social Security, is Medicare going to survive or not, all these subsidies for billionaires, who writes the tax laws. You know, we're talking about corporate fascism. The nation states are subject to the power of massive multinational corporations. I'm not talking about little local entities. So I think that's the big divide. We got nationalist fascism, today it's corporate fascism. That's a big subject.
So maybe we'll just have one or two more.
Yep.
We got one here.
Like to have folks consider what the contrast would be if you came down to Chicago State and go to the facility that my colleague here operates at 9601 South Cottage Grove and deal with the contrast between what happens at a university like that in terms of facilities, and also contextualizing what the difference is between revolutionary art in an apartheid community versus you know, what's going on in this part of the world.
Thank you.
Sure. From that, a real critical look at the role of organic intellectuals springing up that are creating this train of thought to challenge the notion of this paradigm, to create images to reimagine that break down the borders, to the geographic and mental and philosophical borders, to actually create a new paradigm. So how do we get beyond this ring of circle of thought around like-minded individuals and actually break that down into the real world? I mean, this is real world, but you know what I mean.
Beautiful. So at this moment, what we're going to do is we've got a number of questions out here for suggested conversations. If there is nothing of these that you feel like talking about, you're going to come maybe down here, and I'll run a little small group discussion of my own design. And Anthony will run a small group discussion of their own design down here. So at this moment, I'd like to invite you to relocate your bodies to these discussions, and please learn each other's names at the very least and try to have some kind of discussion. And then we'll, for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll call you back.
Yeah. So if you suggested a topic, just raise your hand so people can identify where you are. What we had on the list
Commodification. Yeah, go ahead,
as you
Anthony.
move around, we had commodification down on the stage, Scott Walker over in the wings, nonviolent anarchism,
collective action,
corporate
fascism, what is revolutionary art today, and also intellectual organics. Intellectual organics. Did you hear that? Organic intellectuals. And any other random people? Anthony will convene a group down here. I'll convene a group down here.
All right, if we could take a moment, finish our thoughts with our groups. Say hello, shake hands, and if we could refocus all together.
I heard something being said about Gene Sharp's approach to nonviolence as a way of making revolutionary change. Well, I did meet Gene Sharp in 1950 when he was experimenting with going limp, which I agree with because it's one way of denying authority without being violent. But Gene Sharp believes in using nonviolence to throw some people out of the government so that you have the government to do the same repressive things that you had before.
I'm going to continue to instigate it, and my role as an artist and practitioner. I'm developing something called the Creative People's Caucus. Its intention is to create a live civic and social practice forum that will take into account all that we are and all that we can be and charge forward with it beyond just the notion within academic, but within communal settings. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to say hello to me. And if you don't see me, Baraka Desalegn is pretty easy to find online. There's only another person who's a woman who has a similar name. And if you find her, she knows me and we know each other, and so you'll find us. So I just want to say that. And also the pieces of the left front that were in rosewater and handed to certain people are meant to be passed on. The watermelon is also meant to be passed on. I'm happy to pass it along to you. I'm actually missing one watermelon, so if you have decided to take that, please do. Please smell it. It's also meant to be fragrant.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that until we got into this portion of the program, I was worried that there was too much continuity in the speakers, that there wasn't enough of that, like House of Commons-esque, like disagreement and passion that I thought like characterizes the Congress. That was something I was worried about. But I realized in this sort of portion, my discussion got really passionate, and we both had a very different viewpoints, but very much like the same goal. Which was like better education for America's urban youth and America's youth in general. And it's important that we not all lose sight that a lot of us do have similar visions and similar goals. Just try to really line up those means and listen to what everyone else has to say.
So I want to give a shout out to the process that made this Congress happen. Because I've sat through so many academic conferences on social practice art and politics that for the last 25 years that I'm a bit fed up with them. And I thought it was really special that the organizers, while they facilitated, they let go of control in order to let the participants who self-selected to come to these meetings really shape this. And while it might seem, according to traditional academic protocols, to be in some ways even incoherent, in fact, the thing that really pulls it all together and to me ascribes it its great meaning is what's happened in the last hour. But in the spirit of the fact that we're ending on imperatives to talk about the things that we're most passionate about, we want to see artists stand up for. I would like to go back to something Diana said much earlier today, which has to do with getting our university here at Northwestern to divest itself of stocks that support companies that are destroying the earth. I think this is something Stanford has done. It's something really important. And artists, if you want to get out and help organize, if you're student artists here on campus, I don't think there's any more issue that is more pressing than to make sure that successive generations have clean water and decent food. Because if we don't take care of our bodies and our earth, there'll be no reason to make art anymore.
I had an announcement. I work for the government. I work for the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. Thank you, Baraka. Chicago Artists Month is like the 19th year. In October, we just issued a call for participation. The theme is crossing borders. I would encourage all of you to come up with amazing projects that cross as many borders as you want, and put them up on the website. I'm happy to give you information. chicagoartistmonth.org/partner is where you go to sign up. It would be awesome if all of the thinking and passion that's happening here would be manifest in the city, all over the city in October. Thank you.
Do you have one more back there, Anthony? That's it. That's a, okay. We have one down here. Any other, we can just, for maybe take two more announcement-y kind of things or final statements. Go ahead.
One thing we were talking about is, so the difference between the 30s and this moment. And one thing we might think about is the way that large portions of the left and of artistic practice have been sort of corralled into the academy. And that's easy to get frustrated about, but it might just be something that this context allows us to kind of look in the eye.
Just building off that, I think I agree with what Dakota is saying, that like part of looking it in the eye is to think about it being sort of symptomatic of the moment, and rather than sort of feeling like we are sort of not authentically political subjects that can't organize, that this is sort of the standpoint from which we operate, which is why, I appreciate people both who are university affiliated, like Lisa's saying, that there's sort of campus work happening, but also I think, for those of us that are less affiliated, it's also kind of a question then for us to explore, I think, together and to sort of support each other. Well, how much, even though this is sort of where a lot of these conversations take place, do we think it's the place where we want to have the conversation? If not, is there another, rather than sort of it just being like an option, like that we're just going to step out of it, is there a way for us to sort of intentionally have the political conversations that we want to, but also use these kind of forums as well? Because they're gonna keep happening. Like there's gonna keep being sort of like gatherings that maybe are vague or frustrating or inspiring that happen that are about art and politics at universities. And so there really is a kind of a question of like, well, what do we do with that then? And I think, in terms of the Artists Congress being an ongoing process, I sort of am interested to have that conversation with other people, one-on-one or as a large group. But I don't think the intention was to sort of launch an organization, but I also don't think that would be a bad thing. Okay.
So we have one more comment down here, and then Susie gets the last word. Oh, no, sorry. Okay.
Oh, do you want me to go now? Okay, just to comment on the Gene Sharp. The reason why the revolution in Egypt, well, it was a revolution, but it didn't succeed in changing the government is because they didn't have civil rights. And one thing we have to remember about this country is we can fight for our civil rights and have results if we fight for them. One thing that's important about nonviolent protest is you gotta have some covenant between the people and the government. So it's important that America become active because we are so powerful in this world, we can create change in other parts, as we did with the apartheid regime. Activating on Gene Sharp's rules do require that cooperation, but it is a possibility. And I just wanted to say, if you guys watch Link TV, channel 375, it's on Comcast, it's on DirecTV, write it down, 375, you'll get a tremendous number of documentaries that'll be extremely helpful to all the subjects we talked about today. It's like a whole new learning experience. Used to be what PBS is. PBS is kind of sold out now. Go to Link TV, 375, DirecTV.
Well, thank you. The reason why I grabbed the mic was actually to thank all of you for your questions. I merely at this point want to move us next door. The theater staff needs to leave here. But what I first want to say are a couple closing remarks. One, to let you know that in the context of this conversations that have been going on for about 5 months, there were a couple platforms that were developed in addition to this day. There are 2 websites that are noted in your program. If you do have thoughts, if you want to continue a conversation, there are platforms online to have that kind of exchange. We will be posting information. There's space for you to share links to your work and to correspond with one another. That was something that was pretty clear in the conversation to date, that part of what is desired is the opportunity to connect to other folks who are thinking about the questions in the room. Then to note that this is not meant to be a catch-all, meaning that I just want to quickly address the question that this was not meant to be an academic program. It really was genuinely asking, how might we envision a Congress today? There are a lot of ways to do it. This is how we chose to do it. I want to thank everybody who has put time and energy into the process, to thank the presenters, again, to thank all of you for staying with us, and to invite you next door. We have food, we have beverages, and we have an exhibition to see, and we encourage you to keep on talking. Thank you.